Hello guys, welcome back to another Nioh 2 build video. Today we're going to be taking a look at my Immortal Devastator build, and as the name suggests, is extremely tanky whilst promoting a very aggressive playstyle and offering a good amount of damage in the process. It also offers multiple playstyles in the way you choose to attack. It's mainly an Odachi build that also makes use of the axe. In terms of the multiple playstyles, you have the main skills utilized with Odachi being Ground Quake and Imperative Strike, either focusing on either individually or combining them within a rotational combo. For more advanced players, you can also choose to combine weapon switch transitions to utilize axe combos. Before we get into the stats and armor of the build, I want to spend a bit of time talking about how it's played and the unique skill and stat synergy that it has. To start things off, I'm running with a blessed weapon, not so much for the purity, but for the unique ability of being able to keep us from guard. Whilst having the ability to regain ki after guarding is fantastic in itself, it's not the main reason I'm running this. The main reason is it allows us to instantly counter from guard by transitioning into Imperative Strike. This technique works great on any weapon that has a quick draw skill, such as Odachi, sword, dual swords and hatchets. This is because quick draw skills are able to transition directly from a ki pulse, especially on single sword where EI quick draw 3 allows you to automatically enter EI stance from a ki pulse. To maximize synergy with this playstyle, we also have an upgrade in the samurai skill tree called Ki Pulse Heaven. This gives us a significant attack buff after performing a perfectly timed ki pulse in high stance. Now the thing about this buff is that it doesn't last long at all. You also can't reapply this buff until it's run out. So the best way to maximize a buff like this would be to use an attack that is both fast but also does the highest amount of damage possible in a single hit. This is where quick draw attacks are perfect, and since quick draw attacks transition directly from a ki pulse, we already have perfect synergy between these three mechanics of Blessed Weapon, Imperative Strike and Ki Pulse Heaven, but there's far more synergy to come. So another upgrade is Purify Yokai Realm Heaven. This will give us another attack buff that lasts a little bit longer when performing a perfectly timed ki pulse to dispel a yokai pool. So again, dispelling a yokai pool is going to give us two attack buffs that are going to be applied to our Imperative Strike, which we are transitioning to directly from that ki pulse. Another amazing thing about Imperative Strike is if you're close to an enemy, which is when they're practically on top of you, very often the Odachi will clip through their body and activate on the hit behind them. This means on top of the activated attack buffs, you're also getting a backstab damage bonus. It's really incredible, and all of this alone, even without mentioning all the other mechanics we're utilizing, justifies why I don't run Moonlit Snow, which is the most common Odachi playstyle. Now, even with that said, the skill I actually focus around the most in the sense of skill damage modifiers is Ground Quake. You might think based on what I just said that Imperative Strike should take priority in terms of where we stack the most damage, and yes, you could choose to prioritize this. However, Ground Quake is by far the most used skill in my rotation, and when maximized, it not only does tremendous ki damage, but it literally one-shots smaller enemies when running through a mission, and also applies a knockdown effect to human enemies, allowing you to set up your Imperative Strike rotation, which typically you would choose over a final blow or grapple unless the enemy is extremely low on health. Speaking of which, one of the techniques I use to transition from Imperative Strike into a skill if the enemy is low health is the weapon switch combo. This is because it's the fastest attack possible directly after an Imperative Strike. Not only that, but like all quick draw attacks, it's another attack that transitions directly from a ki pulse, allowing it to synergize with everything we've already spoken about. Now whilst this is entirely optional, you can choose to play this build by spamming Ground Quake or Imperative Strike. I actually like to incorporate the axe with the weapon switch into my basic rotations. So let's take a look at something here. Bear with me if this gets a little bit complicated, I will simplify it. If we break down the individual skill damage, we'll test with no buffs and no backstab damage bonuses. Our Ground Quake is maximized through inheritable damage modifiers. Both Ground Quake and Imperative Strike are being boosted by attack based on stamina and attack based on strength skill modifiers, both of which are maxed out at 99. TLDR, my Ground Quake and Imperative Strike are doing a lot of damage. We're going to see how well the damage of weapon switching holds up against them. So, Ground Quake hits for 4218. Imperative Strike hits for 4412. Our weapon switch into Axe hits for 3989. That is almost the same amount of damage as the two maximized main skills, and is more than the default damage values if they weren't modified. Now, my axe isn't even remotely the same level as my Odachi. For one, the Odachi is level 170 and upgraded to +9. The axe is level 160, upgraded to +6. The Odachi is fully optimized with tempering, the axe is not. If the axe were to be fully optimized, then the weapon switch would be doing just as much damage as the main skills, and the damage isn't even the main reason I utilize weapon switching. Not only is it great for finishing low HP enemies off, due to how fast it can transition from any attack, but it also allows us to chain moves together. and because we're running Axe as our secondary weapon, it gives us access to both Rage and Adamantite. Rage being another attack buff, and Adamantite giving us 100% poise, meaning we can attack through anything. And as long as it doesn't break our ki, aka running out of stamina, or as long as it isn't a grab attack, we can continue to attack through any onslaught of enemy attacks whilst maintaining our ki pulse attack buff through transitioning attacks between perfectly timed ki pulses. My general rotation on boss fights is Ground Quake into ki pulse, Imperative Strike into weapon switch, then into Axe skill Titanic Strength, into weapon switch, into Imperative Strike. This is a seamless rotation that does a hell of a lot of damage and is also fairly decent at ki management. However, there are also times when it's more efficient to simply spam Ground Quake. This would most likely be a situation where I don't have the Adamantite Axe buff applied, either whilst running through a mission and becoming overwhelmed, or against elite yokai, or in a very rare case where the boss has exceeded the time in which my Adamantite buff can stay active. And I'll share a little trick with you for when I'm spamming Ground Quake, as this trick also applies to any time you do a ki pulse with any weapon, though I mostly only use this with Ground Quake spamming due to things becoming too convoluted if you're already trying to juggle multiple mechanics. I want you to take a look at my stamina bar when performing a regular ki pulse. Notice how generation stops for a moment before regenerating. Now watch it again. See how it instantly regenerated rather than stopping for a second. This is done by utilizing ki flux in the samurai tree. Not only does this increase the amount of ki you regain, but also the speed at which you do so, allowing you to spam certain combos without ever running out of ki. The technique I like to use for this is the thumb slide. So let's say I'm in high stance. At the point of a ki pulse, I hit R1 to do so, whilst also pressing square, which would switch me into mid stance. But directly after pressing square, I slide my thumb back to triangle, which keeps me in high stance. So I'm switching to mid stance for a fraction of a second and moving back into high stance, the whole time keeping R1 pressed down. So R1 square, slide to triangle, all in a single motion. Look at the stance bar in the bottom right corner to get an idea of the speed at which I'm doing this. So now that we've covered the basic playstyle, let's take a look at the skill trees. So for the Odachi then, the main abilities we have are Imperative Strike and Ground Quake. We're using the Mystic Art Subtle Blade, which increases ki damage from frontal strikes to enemies that are attacking. On my low stance, I also take Tiger's Blade, as sometimes I use this against charging enemies, and it can also be used to position behind an enemy for backstab damage boosted Imperative Strike. I don't use mid stance too much because typically we can just smash our way through any human enemies, but to keep myself from getting bored, this is where I have all my parries as well as Moonlit Snow, which honestly never gets used but is there for the sake of having it available to me. To truly maximize our core playstyle, we could completely ignore everything in this path and focus on all of our passive modifiers such as ki regeneration, final blow damage, damage against human enemies, grapple damage, increased ki, and then dump everything else into Odachi attack increase. Now I also have Swirling Snow unlocked, which is a hidden ability I got from farming Magara Neotaka, you know, the giant ice demon dude with the massive Odachi. It's actually pretty useful as it can hit multiple targets, and if you have Adamantite up alongside Battle Focus, which is another axe buff which we'll talk about in a moment, you can just swing this around for ages without being interrupted. I've been able to kill quite a few bosses with level sync on just by holding down the triangle button, so it could be pretty funny. So let's take a quick look at the axe tree. Not a lot to talk about here. All you need in here is Titanic Strength if you're using the weapon switch combos, but really you're mostly using the axe just for the buffs, which are Adamantine, Rage, and Battle Focus. You want to attach each one to a specific stance. Adamantine is going to give you poise and defense, Rage will give you damage, and Battle Focus will give you a reduction to ki cost when attacking. So in our samurai skill tree, the main things you want are definitely Flux and Flux 2. I encourage you to pick up Flash Attack, which is what allows us to gain access to the weapon switch combo. This is what adds an attack when switching weapon directly after a ki pulse. You should already have all of your ki pulse modifiers such as ki pulse Heaven and Purify Yokai Realm. You will want damage boost strength and damage boost stamina. These are what I attach to my Imperative Strike and Ground Quake in high stance. In the Shifling tree, I recommend picking up Leechkin, which helps you when you use your yokai ability, and then I suggest grabbing anything that modifies your burst counter, such as Special Finesse Refresh, which restores your ki after a counter, Finesse Focus, which increases your yokai ability damage after a counter, Finesse Recuperate, which restores your health after a successful counter. I next prioritize anything that boosts my anima, so Earth Vein raises our maximum anima, Dragon Vein increases the rate at which we earn anima, Dragon's Echo, which restores some anima used to cast a yokai ability if that soul core matches the type of our Spirit Guardian. For your info, you can change any core you have to be Feral, Brute or Phantom by using a Mortal Soul core in the Soul Fusion. Absorb Yokai Realm, which lets us use our yokai ability in a yokai pool to both purify it, and it gives us an anima boost, as well as Devour Yokai Realm, which gives you an anima boost when purifying our yokai realm with the perfect timed ki pulse. Now, to get these last two abilities to really synergize, you can get your soul cores to roll with a skill called Yokai Ability Ki Pulse, which lets you ki pulse when using a yokai ability. So before we get into the gear and stats, let's quickly take a look at the Jutsu I use, as there's quite a few things that go into the tankiness aspect of the build. So the main two Omyo magic skills needed are Life Leech Talisman and Extraction Talisman. Life Leech Talisman is going to let us absorb health when we deal damage to the enemy, and because we're highly aggressive and poising through all attacks, this is going to keep us at max health the entire time. Extraction Talisman is here because we have a hell of a lot of modifiers that are procced via Amrita gain, one of which is a significant damage buff that comes from absorbing Amrita in high stance due to the Tenjin Spirit Guardian, which I'll get into later. I also take Rejuvenation Talisman and Steel Talisman to buff up before a boss fight. You don't need these, but I have space for them, and these in combination with everything else are what make you truly immortal with this build. If you die with all of these things active, then you're definitely doing something wrong. On top of that, in case you do something very wrong, we have 3 quick change scrolls from ninjutsu for safe measure, allowing us to resurrect Sekido style even if we were to die. Due to the amount of points in Omyo Magic and how many of each spell I'm carrying, I have space for more spells, and so I've chosen to carry Weakness Talisman, which weakens the enemy's defenses. So sometimes I switch this out for Luck Talismans when farming. This slot isn't relevant to the build and therefore it is entirely optional. So let's take a look at the gear, and then we'll talk about the stat rolls on the gear afterwards. For our weapon, we're using the Firefire Blade. Now, you have other options in regard to Odachis that are also blessed weapons that come as part of a set, but I run this one because it has decent base damage whilst offering a proc for Amrita absorption, which is something we're doing all the time, so I'm trying to stack as many Amrita based procs as possible onto this build. As with Extraction Talisman, it's something we're doing all the time. For our axe, we're running Gozu Tenno's axe, which combined with a single piece of obsidian armor and our Yasakani Magatama is going to give us increased duration on our rage buff as well as 3% reduction to damage received. We also have Warrior of the West's bow for 2-piece life increase. Our second ranged weapon is entirely optional as it's not really fundamental to the build, so moving straight onto the armor, we're running 4 pieces of Tatanashi with 5-piece set bonus activated. In total, this set gives us 15% damage reduction from projectiles, 6% reduction in general damage taken, damage bonus based on equipment weight rank A, and 20% reduction to elemental damage, which, when stacked in other places, which we are doing, makes us pretty much immune to elemental damage. We are running Obsidian Gauntlets to reach that 3-piece bonus with our axe. We of course want our Yasakani Magatama accessory for the reduction to set bonus requirements, and for our other accessory I'm running with a pipe for native key increase. So let's take a look at our optimized stats. On the Odachi, the most important thing here is the inheritable you see at the bottom, attack bonus stamina. You could also have this based on strength. Now the reason that I'm running this instead of a damage boost to imperative strike or ground quake is simply because this modifier applies across the board to all of our skills. I have block increase to help with our counter strikes, skill damage reduction to help with our aggression, and final blow damage, just because ground quake tends to put you in a position for a final blow more so than a grapple when they're knocked down onto the ground. And if they're low HP, this is an easy finisher, but as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to do this if they still have a lot of health, or if you do this right after an opener, as in that situation you're better off transitioning into your imperative strike combo. I also have life drain on active skill, just to go along with the main theme of the build being tankiness. On my bow, damage bonus familiarity, and then everything else that supports the bow directly, such as bow speed up, increased movement speed whilst aiming, key damage, and range damage. Keep in mind, for our armor, everything is optimized with orange inheritables in order to get attack and ground quake damage on every piece of gear. If you don't know about orange inheritables, I highly suggest you look up a guide online. I touched on this briefly in my last video, but it's quite a lengthy subject and too much to include in this video. So just look up a guide to orange inheritables and also trading in Nioh too, as trading is the best way to get them. So anyway, on our headpiece we have key increase, toughness, life, defense, and our inheritables of attack and ground quake damage. On our chest, defense bonus based on Amrita gauge, elemental damage taken, life, damage taken at critical, and our 2 inheritables. On the gloves, defense, toughness, life, and our 2 inheritables, with a bonus inheritable of luck increase, which of course isn't necessary. If you can't tell, the theme here is defensive skills, with our inheritables being attack orientated, and then putting on any bonus inheritables that we have room for. For the legs, tenacity, toughness, defense, key recovery bonus based on Amrita gauge, and our 2 inheritables. For the boots, faster winded recovery, running speed, defense, toughness, and our 2 inheritables. On our accessories, we have pretty much the same roles. Here you have more room to customize based on personal preference. I've chosen to maximize certain defensive aspects of the build. Elemental damage reduction is the one I would highly suggest taking on both accessories along with your chest armor piece, because in tandem with the Tatanashi set bonus, all of these combined make you invincible to elemental damage. I've taken life increase, ailment affliction reduction, and on this accessory, backstab damage taken. This is probably the weakest of all of the roles and the one that confuses me the most. Weakest because you're rarely going to get hit from behind unless you're not locked onto an enemy and you turn away from them. I'm using it because sometimes I like to run past enemies when speeding through a mission, and I also like to jump into massive groups, which means occasionally being surrounded and thus susceptible from behind. But it confuses me because I'm unable to find detailed information on what exactly this is a percent reduction of. Is it a flat damage reduction to damage received from behind, or is it a 9% of a percentage? Because backstab damage is its own modifier. So let's say you take 20% increased damage from behind. Does this then take 9% off of that 20%? The skill info says it reduces damage taken from behind, so I'd like to assume it's just a simple flat 9% reduction. But honestly, I don't know, so I can't really tell you whether this is worth taking or not. Anyway, we basically have the same rolls on our Yasakani Megatama. Oh, and before we move on, I quickly want to mention, you might have noticed that I have a couple of pieces of 170 gear. This chest piece came from a 170 armor item I found. That was just pure luck. It's the only 170 piece of gear I've seen that was of divine quality, but the weapon came from a soul core I found. I soul matched the soul core onto a corrupted weapon, then soul matched the corrupted weapon with my current weapon. So if you didn't know, that's a way to level up your weapons with a soul core. If you want to try and farm a 170 soul core, I highly suggest turning level sync on wherever you're farming, as this seems to drastically improve the level of items that I'm receiving, including the plus numbers to armor pieces. So let's take a look at our Spirit Guardian and cores. We're of course using Tenjin Kajaku. I've tried to avoid using this in most of my builds, but in many cases it's just the best Spirit Guardian, and there's a reason that it's meta right now. The damage buff you get in high stance when absorbing Amrita is just too strong, and it's applied permanently when running Extraction Talisman. In a lot of builds you don't need to use the Extraction Talisman, which is why I didn't use it in my last build if the build revolves around fights that aren't going to last more than like 8 seconds, in which case you can just hotkey Spirit Stones to use before the start of a fight. But with a build like this, you're using it all the time in all situations. We also have lots of modifiers affected by Amrita absorption, so Extraction Talisman is key to connecting them all together. We of course want to play in high stance to take advantage of this. For our second Guardian Spirit, we're using Inner Saseo, which gives us a damage reduction mid-attack, which again is something we're doing all the time due to the aggression of this build. For the Soul Cores then, we're running on Ryoki for another 10% damage reduction in mid-attack, which combined with Inner Saseo is around 17.5% damage reduction when mid-attack. Our main core and yokai ability is Kasha. The ability is really strong, does great knockback, imbues fire, and has great life drain. But it also comes with faster movement on Amrita absorption, so again constantly active, making us extremely mobile, with the exception of when Adamantine is active, which actually slows down our movement. So this really helps combat that feeling of sluggishness, and also serves as a free tiger running scroll when we're speedrunning missions. For our third yokai ability, we don't have much attunement space for anything big, but we have enough for a Kappa Soul Core, which works out well because it basically increases our block stat, which synergizes quite well with the block counter playstyle that we have going on with the Blessed Weapon and Odachi. Its yokai ability is actually pretty hilarious, even though I don't really use it. It gives you a Kappa shield on your back, making you immune to damage from behind. I haven't really found a use for it other than it being an absolute meme, but anyway, moving on. For the core stats, obviously this is Endgame in Dream of the Strong, and I'm almost level 300, so I'll try and explain our core stats in a way that's applicable to you if you're a lower level than I am. First thing I do is put 10 points into everything. Then I look at the stat requirements on my armor, Yasakani Megatama, and Spirit Guardian, as you won't even be able to use the stats on these items if you don't reach a certain requirement of certain stats. After I've applied all the points in the relevant places based on that, I max out my two main stats, in this case strength and stamina, not only for the Odachi but also for the axe and the weight reduction bonus. Now very importantly, I also have my Odachi remodeled to dual scale with stamina and strength. Now if you don't know how to dual scale a weapon, I'll show you after we finish up here in the stats. I have 20 points in magic, which is enough to carry all of the Omyo spells I showed you earlier. I've got around 30 points in constitution for a bit of extra life, and dump the rest of my points into heart, not only for the key increase, but it's the only leftover stat that raises our Odachi damage. So now I'll show you how to remodel for dual scaling. So if you're still in the process of leveling and only have one stat maxed out at 99, then you want to focus on single scaling, which is very simple. You just select the specialization relevant to your highest stat. All weapons scale with 3 different stats, at obviously 3 ratings. So typically Odachi would be strength focused, its other 2 stats are stamina and heart, but if you have 99 and 2 stats, in this case strength and stamina, we can dual scale it. You do this by pressing triangle on one of the stats to lock it in, and then press X on the other stat. So in this case you'd hit triangle on stamina and hit X on strength, and that's how you scale 2 stats, which gives you the highest possible damage boost from remodeling, provided you have 2 stats at 99. Finally, for our clan, typically I've always used Todo when wearing heavy armor, not only for the life increase but the damage boost to wearing heavy armor. However, this build is so tanky, the life increase isn't needed, and in regards to the damage boost, it's completely overshadowed by the clan we're currently in, which is the Honda clan. I managed to get myself to max rank thanks to the information provided to me by you guys in my last video. I was misled to believe that the stat increase comes from the amount of time that you've been in the clan, which isn't the case. You just need to donate enough in order to raise your rank, which in turn increases the stat bonus, which in Honda clan is damage reduction at full health, but most importantly active skill damage. Look at the size of the active skill damage boost we're receiving right now. This is absolutely ridiculous. I don't think I'll ever be leaving this clan unless that number gets nerfed. I actually can't believe how quite literally OP that is for a clan passive. So yeah, use Honda, raise your rank immediately. That's pretty much the build, guys. There was a lot of information in this video, so no doubt I've forgotten something. If I have, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you have any other questions or even recommendations on what you'd like to see next, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to reply to you. You're of course always welcome to follow us over on Twitch and Instagram. Just look up Xenoswarm on the relevant platforms and links can be provided in the description. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button as that really helps the video get picked up, and if you're not already subscribed, consider doing so for more Nioh 2 content coming soon. Okay guys, take care.